There was a time when being human didn't mean being alone. Walk back just 50,000 years, and the world was crowded with people who were not like you, but were not animals either. They built fires. They buried their dead. They made tools, raised children, and looked up at the same stars you do tonight. And yet, none of them are here anymore. Just us. Just Homo sapiens. Before we get into why, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me which ancient human species you find the most fascinating, and subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into the story of how we became who we are, because this one is going to change how you think about what it means to be human at all. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. Was it really a competition? Did we win because we were smarter, faster, better? Or is the truth something far stranger? That you exist right now, reading this, because of a series of accidents so improbable that if even one of them had gone differently, you simply wouldn't be here? Let's start with the most famous of our lost relatives, the Neanderthals. For roughly 400,000 years, Neanderthals ruled Ice Age Europe. They weren't the hunched, grunting brutes you've seen in cartoons. They had brains as large as ours, in some cases larger. They controlled fire. They made composite tools, glued stone points to wooden shafts with pitch they processed through controlled heating, a multi-step chemical process. They buried their dead with what looks like ceremony. Some evidence suggests they made art. Engraved markings on cave walls in Gibraltar that predate any known modern human presence in the area. And here's the part that should stop you cold. They survived ice ages, megafauna, and brutal European winters for hundreds of thousands of years before we ever showed up. Then, within a few thousand years of modern humans arriving in Europe, they were gone. So what happened? For decades, the assumption was simple. We killed them, or we outcompete them so badly they starved. But the genetic evidence tells a much messier story. When scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they found something nobody expected. Pieces of Neanderthal DNA are still alive, inside you. If your ancestry traces back to outside sub-Saharan Africa, somewhere between 1 and 2% of your genome is Neanderthal. That's not the genetic signature of two species at war. That's the genetic signature of two populations that live close enough and long enough to fall in love, have children, and raise families together. Recent fossil discoveries have pushed this even further back than anyone expected. Evidence of interbreeding between early modern humans and Neanderthals stretching back over 100,000 years, far earlier than the Great Migration out of Africa story most of us learned in school. Which means the boundary between us and them wasn't a wall. It was a blur for tens of thousands of years. So if we weren't simply replacing them through conquest, what actually happened? The leading theory now isn't a single dramatic event. It's something far quieter and in some ways far sadder. Assimilation and absorption. Neanderthal populations were never huge to begin with. Genetic diversity studies suggest their total population may have numbered only in the tens of thousands across the entire continent. When modern human populations arrived, larger, more interconnected, exchanging genes and ideas across vast social networks, Neanderthal groups didn't need to be defeated in battle. They just needed to be outnumbered generation after generation until their distinct identity dissolved into ours. Not erased. Diluted, absorbed, but Neanderthals are just one chapter. And honestly, they might be the chapter we understand best, because we have hundreds of their fossils. Now let's talk about a species we've never actually seen. Somewhere in the mountains of Siberia, in a cave called Denisova, researchers found a tiny fragment of bone, a finger bone barely bigger than a fingernail. When they extracted DNA from it, they discovered it belonged to a human species nobody had ever identified before. We call them Denisovans. And to this day, we have almost no skeletons. A few teeth, a jawbone, that finger bone. That's nearly the entire physical fossil record of an entire branch of humanity. And yet, we know they're real because, just like the Neanderthals, they live on in us. Denisovan DNA shows up at surprisingly high levels in modern populations across Asia and Oceania, particularly in people from Papua New Guinea, parts of the Philippines, and Tibet. In fact, One specific Denisovan gene helps modern Tibetan populations survive at extreme high altitude, where oxygen is scarce, a trait that would take ordinary evolution tens of thousands of years to develop from scratch, but that modern humans got for free by interbreeding with a species that had already solved that problem. And it doesn't stop there. New research has uncovered evidence of a Denisovan gene called MUC19 that appears to have helped early modern humans survive the journey into the Americas, a genetic gift passed down from a species most people have never even heard of, quietly shaping the bodies of people on a continent the Denisovans themselves never reached. Think about that for a second. A species we've never found a skull for may have helped determine who could survive crossing into a new world, thousands of years after that species itself had vanished. So if Neanderthals were absorbed and Denisovans were absorbed, what about the others? Because there were others. And this next one might be the strangest of all. In 2003, on the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists digging in a cave called Liang Bua found something that didn't make sense. Tiny skeletons, adult humans, fully formed, standing barely over a meter tall, with brains roughly the size of a chimpanzee's, and yet surrounded by sophisticated stone tools and evidence of using fire. They named the species Homo floresiensis. The internet immediately nicknamed them hobbits. And the wildest part? Based on the dating of the cave layers, these tiny humans appear to have been living on that island as recently as 50,000 years ago, meaning they were alive at the same time as us. For years, scientists argued about why they vanished. But newer research has zeroed in on something specific: climate. Detailed analysis of the cave sediment layers shows a severe, decades-long drought hit the region right around the time Homo floresiensis disappeared from the archaeological record, roughly 60,000 years ago. Their water sources dried up. Their prey would have moved. And right around that same window, modern humans were spreading through the Indonesian archipelago for the very first time. So picture it. A tiny, isolated human population, already stretched thin by a drying landscape, suddenly encountering a taller, more populous, more widely connected species moving into their territory for the first time in their history. Climate didn't necessarily kill them directly. It may have simply set the stage, pushing two human species into the same shrinking space at the worst possible moment for one of them. And Homo floresiensis wasn't even the last of the small island species to go. A similar small-bodied human species, found in the Philippines and known as Homo luzonensis, appears to have persisted in isolation on its own island for an extraordinarily long time too. Another isolated population, another island, another disappearance we still don't fully understand. Then there's the one that might be the biggest mystery of all, Homo erectus. While Neanderthals, Denisovans, and the island hobbits were each confined to relatively small regions for tens of thousands of years, Homo erectus did something almost unbelievable. It survived in some form for over 1 million years. It was the first human species to leave Africa. It spread across Asia, and on the Indonesian island of Java, at a site called Ngandong, dating evidence suggests Homo erectus may have still been alive as recently as around 100,000 years ago, meaning this single species witnessed almost the entire history of every other human species on this list, watched some of them rise, and was still standing when modern humans began their own journey out of Africa. A species that outlasted nearly everyone and still didn't make it to today. So now zoom out. Lay it all out together. At one point, at least 5 different kinds of humans were alive on this planet at the same time. Some overlap with us for thousands of years. Some interbred with us so thoroughly that pieces of them are sitting inside your cells right now, possibly helping you breathe, helping you digest food, helping your immune system recognize threats your ancestors faced tens of thousands of years ago. Some vanished in isolation, undone by a drought, a shrinking coastline, a population too small to recover from one bad decade. And one, Homo erectus, simply outlasted almost everyone else, only to disappear right before the finish line. And through all of that, through interbreeding, through isolation, through climate shifts, through population bottlenecks, so severe that entire lineages came within a hair's breadth of vanishing completely, one branch made it through. Not because it was destined to, not because it was obviously superior, but because of an accumulation of small advantages, lucky timing, and sheer population size that, generation after generation, tipped the odds. That branch is you. You are not the inevitable endpoint of evolution. You are the survivor of a five-way bottleneck, carrying pieces of at least two of the others inside your own DNA, sitting here on the other side of tens of thousands of years of extinction events that could have gone differently in 100 different ways. So here's something to sit with. If even one of those moments had played out differently, if one small population hadn't crossed paths with another at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place, the story of human might have ended up looking completely different, or it might not have included us at all. If this kind of deep history blows your mind the way it blows mine, make sure you're subscribed because there's so much more of this story still to tell. Drop a comment and let me know if you could bring back just one of these lost human species for a single conversation. Which one would you choose? I'll see you in the next one.